Coming up, President Bush has been saying, wait till September for a report from General Petraeus. How many times have we heard that mantra? But who's going to write it? It turns out not the general, but the Bush speechwriters are going to put the words in the mouth of the general. We're waiting to hear from a guy. Who is he, Charlie McCarthy or General Petraeus? You're watching Hardball, only on MSNBC. Welcome back to Hardball. In just 4 weeks, the White House and Congress will debate whether to keep the Iraq war going. A crucial part of the debate will be an Iraq progress report. But the report itself and who's actually going to write it has become part of the argument. Hardball correspondent David Schuster reports.
This summer, in his effort to buy time on Iraq, President Bush has stated one name repeatedly.
General Petraeus definitely need to be in consultation, and will be, with General David Petraeus. I'm going to wait for David Petraeus to come back and give us the report.
But a month before the crucial Iraq report is delivered, the Washington Post wrote today that Bush administration officials recently suggested keeping General Petraeus from testifying to Congress in public. According to the report, officials proposed handing over those duties to Secretary of State Rice and Defense Secretary Gates. Today, the White House was backtracking and in full damage control mode.
General Petraeus and Ambassador Crocker will testify to the Congress in both open as well as closed sessions prior to the September 15th report. That has always been our intention.
Still, administration officials confirm the Petraeus report will not actually be written by the general or his military staff, but will instead be written by the White House. In other words, the Iraq Progress report will come from the same team that declared mission accomplished early in the war and over the past 2 years offered rosy statements like this.
We're making progress because of we've got a strategy for victory.
Progress has not come easily, but it has been steady.
The White House effort to control what Congress will hear and read in September is fueling predictions of an even rougher political clash. Meanwhile, the violence in Iraq grinds on. A suicide bombing today killed 9 Iraqis in Baghdad, and in northern Iraq, where Iraqi militias on Tuesday set off bombs in the midst of an obscure religious sect, officials raised the death toll to more than 400.
This is a very horrific act, and really about the only way to describe it is a lot of destruction, and it appears to be a place where genocide was committed.
It's also a place that underscores the limitations of the U.S. troop escalation. American soldiers cannot defend the entire country. As it stands, a new debate is raging over areas like Baghdad, where the increase of U.S. troops has been the most visible. Today, McClatchy newspapers reported, quote, U.S. officials say the number of civilian casualties in the Iraqi capital is down 50%, but U.S. officials declined to provide specific numbers. And statistics gathered by McClatchy newspapers do not support the claim. The number of car bombings in July actually was 5% higher than the number recorded last December. Furthermore, the Iraqi parliament continues its summer vacation after having failed to pass a single law that would help with political reconciliation.
It all comes down to the politics, because what is Petraeus trying to do? Create enough security to turn it over to Iraqis. Right. But if there's no Iraqis to hand the ball to, there's no successful surge.
On top of it all, the U.S. military says the American troop death toll in Iraq is now more than 3,700. Still, the war continues with no end in sight. And once again, there is the specter of an administration that promises one thing and delivers far less. I'm David Schuster for Hardball in Washington.
Thank you, David. A new CNN poll, by the way, finds most Americans don't trust General Petraeus to give us the straight skinny on Iraq. Paul Hackett's an Iraqi anti-war veteran who believes Petraeus should testify before Congress, and Mark Williams is a radio talk show host and a columnist for the Sacramento Union. Let me start with Paul Hackett. I thought, well, let's listen to the president here one more time. I think we ought to let President Bush speak for himself here. Here's what President Bush has said over the past weeks about the General Petraeus report.
General Petraeus and Ambassador Crocker will be coming back to report on the findings of the success of the surge. The surge success will not only include military successes and military failures, but also political successes and political failures. How the troops are configured, what the deployment looks like, will depend upon the recommendations of David Petraeus. David Petraeus, the general on the ground, will be bringing his recommendations back to the Congress on or about September the 15th. This September, as Congress has required, General Petraeus and Ambassador Crocker will return to Washington to provide a more comprehensive assessment.
Well, here we have it. Paul Hackett, your thoughts on what happened here. What happened to this Petraeus report? It's now morphed into what's going to be a report written by the White House, its speechwriters under political tutelage, under the president's influence, and it's going to be apparently handed out by General Petraeus.
Well, you know, I don't necessarily think that that was unforeseeable to the extent that the legislation that was passed by Congress back in May and signed off by the president suggested as much. And, you know, from my perspective, I don't really care who delivers the message or the news. I'm more concerned with the substance of the news.
Well, where do you think we're going to learn? Whose substance will it be, though? Will it be the White House's substance, or will it be the military men's substance?
I think, frankly, for the White House, it's more difficult, if not near impossible these days, for their spin, as much as it exists these days, to further hide really what is going on in Iraq on a daily basis.
So you don't expect them to gussy this thing up a bit to make it look like more of a glass half full than a glass half empty?
Look, politics is politics, and of course they're going to try, as much as Democratic Congress is going to try, to put their spin on it. But I think that ultimately General Petraeus and Secretary Gates will deliver what most Americans will hopefully see as the reality on the ground in Iraq. And to that extent, I mean, I'm quite confident that General Petraeus is going to testify. We all know that. And I'm not personally troubled by the fact that Secretary Gates may play a large role in that. I actually think that Secretary Gates should play a large role in that. And I think, you know, for whatever my opinion is worth, I think Secretary Gates has done a pretty decent job thus far in getting a handle on what is happening in Iraq and trying to present it to the American people in an understandable way. And it seems to me that both Petraeus and Gates are really putting forth a good effort to come up with a strategy which has really been absent, in my humble opinion, for the last 4 years, 4.5 years since this war started. So